Hey, Brittany, this is the price I want to list it at. Take it or leave it. So, being young Brittany, I said, well, I'll take it. I'll list it. Hello, welcome to Closing Chapters, Everyday Real Estate Tales. I'm your host, Brittany Fry. I'm a realtor, I'm a military wife, and I'm a mom. Join me and come transaction by transaction throughout my real estate career starting back in 2016 to hear about the highs, the lows, and the unexpected turns along the way through all of my customers. It's going to be a crazy ride, you guys. I am so excited to share the past, the current, and then what's coming in the future. Hang tight for the ride. Join me about being a realtor, a military spouse, and a mom. Can't wait to see you there. Hey, happy Sunday, friends. Thank you for joining me again on another episode of Closing Chapters Everyday Real Estate Tales podcast. I am your host, Brittany Fry, and today it is time to talk about a transaction that didn't go so smooth, right? So that's the reality of it. We're just going to cut to the chase. There's a lot of reasons why we had hiccups along the way, and it all started with one thing. And this was a building block for listings for the rest of my career. So, you ready to hear about it? Imagine you are finally retiring from the military. After 20 plus years of service, it is time to decide what's next. Where's forever? So, this is what happened. My military family was ready to move. They were a horse family and they were living out in Dalzell in a standard neighborhood that did not accompany space for their big four-legged friends. So they were toying with the idea of moving to Wisconsin or Georgia and getting themselves a horse farm. And they actually ended up out in Midwest. So, what are we supposed to do? Are we going to sell their house? Are we going to rent their house? What's the best option? Well, first step in listing a house or talking about listing versus renting is to do a walkthrough of the home, sit down and talk about expectations, what the owners are expecting or wanting out of the property. And when I went to look at this property, it was beautiful. It was a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, a little bit over 2,200 square foot house over a half an acre lot in a really nice neighborhood. There was just one huge problem. The house was a little bit bigger and a lot more custom than just about any other house in the neighborhood. It was a nice neighborhood. However, this house was much more elevated. It had higher end products on the inside, cabinetry, countertops, back patio that was really nicely done, brick and stone work that had been done. It was just a little bit more than what matched the rest of the neighborhood. Bamboo floors, different things like that, right? So this can be hard, right? My job is to provide comparable properties, and I have to think like an appraiser. An appraiser wants to match the neighborhood as closely as possible. If at all possible, we'll pull as many comps from the neighborhood as it can. Now, if you're familiar with Dalzell, South Carolina, there are a few neighborhoods that are close together, but then it's kind of remote from town. It's the countryside. So the other rule of thumb is typically to try to find properties within like a 2-mile radius. Okay, appraisers don't like to go outside of that 2-mile radius. They'll stretch to 5 if they have to, but that's what they prefer. Like if they can keep it in this nice little tight nook, then they're happy. The other part of this is that we have to find comparable neighborhoods if we go to another location. And what I mean by that is they want the same type of setting and location, right? So I just told you this is pretty remote out on the countryside. And to find another neighborhood that matches this in the same type of location that's pretty remote out on a countryside proves to be kind of hard. So I stuck with inside the neighborhood and then we adjusted. So basically, we took smaller houses and added to the price point to make them to the same size as theirs, right? We just adjusted it to make it match. And I adjusted for the upgrades in this house, right? And I got a price. And the owners did not like my price because they knew what they put in the property, reasonably so, and they wanted to list it much higher. So we have a decision to make. I also told them, next step, if you don't like my comparables, I get it. At the end of the day, I'm not the appraiser. I'm not the one that tells the lender, yes, it's a go, no, it's not. And I'm happy to help you get it appraised before we list it, to have another third party that does appraisals every day, all day, take a look and give us a value. And they elected not to do that. They simply told me, Brittany, this is the price I want to list it at. Take it or leave it. So, being young Brittany, I said, well, I'll take it. I'll list it. And we did, at the elevated price. Now, here's the kicker, friends. Here's the kicker. This price that was so elevated back in 2018 is like pennies on the dollar now. So, if you could have a crystal ball at any and all times, which we cannot, I wish we could, they should have rented this sucker out for a few more years and they would have gotten everything they wanted and more. Now, there's other risks involved with renting out a property, right? So I think they were ready just to wash their hands of it and have a fresh start with life, which I can understand and appreciate. But it just kicks me at this point, knowing where we're at today, knowing what they could have gotten for this property, that they had to settle. So either way, they chose to list the property at $219,500. I told them, I said, above all costs, you need to be under 220. There's nothing else in this neighborhood that is selling above 220. There's nothing in the neighborhood selling anywhere near 220. It was all like 150, 175, some pushing 200, nowhere near 220. Anyhow, so we list it and it sat on the market for almost 2 months. And for this house, I mean, it was pristine and it was beautiful. It should not have sat a day. It just really shouldn't have. It just was the price, because the price did not match the neighborhood. So we got under contract. We actually got a decent full price offer, and we had closing costs that they had wrapped in there as well, so that was our compromise, is sure, we'll take the full price offer and give you the closing costs that you want. Well, along comes an appraiser that says our house is priced $18,000 too high. Who would have thunk it? What a kick in the stomach, right? And here's the thing. Every appraiser is going to do things a smidge differently. There's not a cut and dry way to do an appraisal, which for somebody like me that just wants a boom answer, it's really hard. I want it to be a fact, not a suggestion, not an opinion. I want it to be a fact. And there's no way for that to happen. So what I tell people whenever we're listing a property is, look, you could have 3 different appraisers come in and they're all going to give you a different price. In a perfect world, theoretically speaking, it's going to be pretty darn close together. But that's not always the case. Sometimes it's very different. We all have an opinion of what something is worth and what weighs heavily, right? We see custom cabinetry, we see elevated floors, we see additional stonework, an additional patio in the backyard, right? But they're not seeing additional square footage, additional bedrooms, additional bathrooms. Now, there was an extra bathroom in this house compared to most in the neighborhood. There was an additional bedroom compared to most in the neighborhood. However, that still just didn't stretch it for them. And that meant we had a choice. We have an appraisal of $201,000. Are we going to accept that and continue on with this offer? Or are we going to say, no, we will not move forward and we're going to start over? Now, the thing that becomes hard with that is with certain loans, the appraisal will stay on file with the property for up to 6 months. Meaning, if we said, no go, we're going back on the market, we know the house is worth more than that, then if somebody else comes along with the same type of financing, they will see the appraisal in the system. So the new appraiser that gets chosen for the new buyer will see the previous appraisal. Do you think that that's going to impact how he appraises the house, he or she? Darn tootin'. And 9 out of 10 times, they're going to come in right on par with one another because one's not going to dictate the other unless they just really feel like something was truly done wrong. And that is slim pickings, my friends. So if you find yourself in this situation, honestly, you got to do some soul searching and decide whether you're really willing to potentially wait another 6 months to sell the house after that appraisal is no longer the comparison point, or are you going to compromise and move forward with the current offer that you have with the lower appraisal? What do you think we should do? I'll tell you what we did. We made the decision to move forward at the $201,000 and get it to the closing table. And what saved us in this situation was that we'd had the conversations up front. I told them we were stretching it. I told them I was concerned about the price point. So even though it was a disappointment, it was not unexpected and it was not a reflection of me, thankfully. Now, to that appraiser, that poor appraiser probably thought that I just did a horrible job pulling CMAs and just listing it willy nilly. And that was not the case. I made the decision to allow the sellers to guide the sales price, which in reality, okay, if you talk to agents, there's so many different opinions and ways of doing everything, right? It's never one shoe fits all. So the reality is everybody's going to say it's their house, they can list it forever whatever they want to. Your job is just to sell it for them. Your job is just to put it on for what they want. I don't believe that. I'm sorry. So the reality is I'm here to be honest and educate you. And I want to support you to the best of my ability. And I cannot do that if I just say, sure, let's list it for something I know is unreasonable and not going to gain traction, not going to sell in your time frame, right? And I'm going to sidebar for half a minute. I actually lost a listing opportunity in Tennessee not too long ago because of this. I had a straightforward conversation with her, and mind you, I had to walk into this house without ever seeing any pictures of it. I had no idea what it looked like. It had always sold off market, so there was no trail for me to follow. It was a beautiful home, beautiful home. And this lady was dead set on a number and thought she was going to get that. And I told her I really thought she was stretching. You know, there's a bunch of new construction in the neighborhood, but they were bigger properties, they were newer properties, and there was some differences there, right? So anyhow, I provided her all the documentation. I showed her all the numbers, where it was coming in, how to build in a buffer, whatever the case may be. And then when she told me, hey, I'm not going to list it unless I can clear this amount, then I went to one of my brokers and I said, hey, I really want to help this lady. She was a recent widow and her husband had done all of the business transactions and everything with housing in the past. And I just wanted to be on her side. I feel very strongly about supporting people and making sure they don't get taken advantage of, right? But I'm not going to sugarcoat something and I'm not going to tell them something that I don't believe in. I feel very strongly about that. So, regardless, we had the conversation. She's like, I understand, that you may be right. And I understand what you're saying and that you may not want to list this property if I'm going to price it at this point. And you just need to let me know, like you're, so and we had a conversation that I know it might just sit here. And if it sits for a year, then maybe I'll decide at that point that it's unattainable and I can't do that. So, okay. So I went and talked to my broker and said, what do you think? Right? Because lesson learned from that point forward, I don't overprice a property for anybody, hardly ever at all. It's kind of my rule. I feel like if we're gonna list it high, then I'm not your person because you're setting me up for failure. You're setting us up for failure, right? I'm telling you the true expectation, and what I think we can do. And it's not a dead set number, right? As realtors, we give a range. We say, hey, this is our high side, right? That I feel comfortable with. And this is where we should be the comfortable. And this is let's get it flown off the shelves and let's go, right? So we've got a range. It's not a dead set number in any way, shape, or form. So, anyhow, I talked to my broker and said, look, this is a situation. She's very clear that she understands that it could sit on the market and that she would not hold me liable. Should I go for it? Because this is not what I do. This is typically, a really big no go for me. And, my broker said, sure, go for it. If you want to help this lady, then go for it. So I told her, game on, and I backtracked it out and everything. And ultimately, what happened, when I mean backtracked it out, I worked from the bottom of the net sheet up, right? So we had it so that she was netting what she wanted, and then I built in the buffers, right? So we add in the commission, we add in any typical asks of a buyer, whether it be a home warranty or closing cost, so that we have an idea, an estimate of all of the costs that would be expected at closing. Okay. So I didn't get the listing. And the reason I didn't get the listing is because another agent listed it a little bit less, about 20 grand less actually, at a lower commission. But also, even at that commission, if I backtracked it out, it wasn't going to make her the net. Or it was right there at it. There was no other buffers or wiggle room put into it. And sure enough, it actually did close like a month ago. And the net was less than what we had agreed upon. So that just goes to show, right, that if somebody's telling you the truth, like stick with them. Because she ended up negotiating off of what she said she was going to and had somebody that probably treated her very transactionally instead of relationally. So, anyhow, that is my soapbox. If you work with me, you are an extension of me, and I will always protect you to the best of my ability. And we work together as a team. So, anyhow, back to this transaction. We decided to settle at the 201 and continue on to closing. As you can imagine, $18,000 is a huge difference, right? And who would have thought that something would come in that low? Now, let's go back to the numbers, right? We said at 2018, we listed this at 219.5. That was under $100 a square foot, okay? Things are going for like over $200 a square foot now. Now, this neighborhood, that would not be the case. Once again, it's countryside. In South Carolina, this area of South Carolina has appreciated greatly, but just not as rapidly as some of the bigger cities and areas have. So this house easily would sell for probably 250, 260 any day, all day right now. It's insane. Now, another note to be had here, right? If you have the ability to hang tight to a property, you have it at a good rate, you have a good payment, and you could rent it and make a profit, even if you're just breaking even for the most part, enough to put a little bit of money aside for any repairs, and it's paying for itself. Okay? The market will always go up. I'm listening to a book right now about stocks, and he is so adamant about the fact that there's one thing you know for certain, and that is the market will always go up, right? It might be a bumpy ride. It's not going to be very smooth to get there. It may drop and it might come back up. It might be a little bit of a roller coaster, but it will always go up. So this whole idea that like the market's going to crash or things are going down, or I've had people say, oh, the market's really slowing down. Well, a smidge, but it's still not anywhere near the pace that it used to be. Right? Remember how many times have we talked about back in 2015, 16, 17, 18? We signed 1-year listing agreements. That was our standard protocol because it took anywhere from 90 to 180 days, give or take, to get a house under contract. So when you come to me and say, oh my gosh, the market has slowed down so much, a house has been on the market for 45 days, y'all, it's still a great market. I don't know how to impress that upon you. It is hard when we get used to the new standard, right? The market changes just about every quarter. It's kind of like a nice little update, a refresh. Like, where are we going? Where's the traction, right? But it is still a very strong market. And at that, we are still growing. The numbers are still going up. The houses are still appreciating. The amount of properties selling or holding for the most part with the higher interest rates. Y'all, that's phenomenal. It's hard for buyers right now to accept this as the new normal. And I'm saying that as a very recent buyer. May 1, we make our first mortgage payment for our new property that is at an interest rate over 6%. And it feels icky. The interest rate that we have on our Tennessee property, I think, is 3.25. We are double. But you know what? That house is still going to appreciate. And we are still not going to be wasting our money because we would be paying more in rent for that house than we could in a mortgage still. And it's ours. And we're going to have a great investment after the fact. So if you can hold on to something, especially if you got it when the rates were good and you got it for a decent price, remember it is always going to go up. Also, a little side note about our property, the one we just closed on, right? The previous owner was military and he held it throughout his whole entire career. He lived in it and then he rented it out. When he sold this property 20 years later, made over $160,000 on this property. Do you hear that? Could you be okay with retiring and getting $160,000 in your pocket? Did he have some costs along the way? I'm sure. Did he have to pay for a mortgage? Sure, but as long as the house was rented, it was covering that mortgage payment. Was that worth $160,000? Heck yeah, any day, all day. So if there's one thing that I could do for a military family, especially if I'm helping them buy their first property, is help them make really good decisions when it is time for them to move forward on what to do with that property. First, to really look at the numbers and see, can we rent it reasonably and build that equity and let it grow? Or is the best thing to do to sell, right? And every situation is different. And I am not faulting this family at all for selling. I just wish that I could give them the money that they deserved, right? And that is just deep in my heart. Like it's so hard when you go into this beautiful property. And whenever a property gets appraised and it comes back low, as an agent, we have the opportunity to send in comparable properties. So I went and found properties that were as close as possible to this property, right? But remember what I said about how they really want to be very specific about the location? They would not accept the comparables that I sent over because they deemed the other neighborhoods higher end than this neighborhood. One of them was really no different at all. The only difference was the fencing. The neighborhood had wrought iron fencing instead of allowing wood fences. Otherwise, it was extremely comparable, but it was closer into town. And then the other one is a combined neighborhood where there's like patio homes, like where's smaller houses, not big yards, all the way up to like 4,000 square foot houses on a decent lot, right? So it was a good mixed neighborhood. And I could find properties I had sold recently that, once again, matched aesthetically extremely close to this house. And they would not adjust or accept it. I think they came up a little bit in order to get to that 201. And that was it. So when a realtor is being honest with you and telling you, hey, we can't match to this neighborhood, it's not the same style or quality or whatever the case may be, just understand that we're not diminishing your property. Okay. This property, if you would have picked it up and moved it to a different neighborhood, would have been worth what we listed it for all day long. There was nothing wrong with this property. It was immaculate and it was beautifully done. Okay. But the reality is, so we have to think through the lens of what the appraiser is going to say or do and what their general guidelines are. And that is why we're the professional. That's why we are supposed to be your trusted advisor. And let us educate you. And that's okay. I also just had the conversation today with clients of mine that I helped them sell a house in South Carolina, and we are closing on their house here in Tennessee tomorrow. So excited for them. But we had the conversation that even me, as a real estate professional of 8 years, and I'm now licensed in 3 states, two of those states, actually all 3 times that we bought a primary residence, right? We purchased our rental property in South Carolina through me. Like that was fine at that point. But all 3 of our primary residencies that we have lived in, we had an agent representing us. In South Carolina, I was not licensed yet. In Tennessee, like I hadn't even started real estate. In Tennessee, I had not gotten my Tennessee license in place yet. And then in North Carolina, I was working really hard and I thought I was going to get my license in queue and I did not get it in time. Actually, I did end up getting it, but I didn't have it hung anywhere. I just dragged my feet after I made the decision that I was going to let somebody help us. But the reality is every state operates a little bit differently. There's different rules and guidelines and forms. And who am I to go into a new state that I don't have any experience in yet and represent myself and say, oh, yeah, I got this? Because I surely would have messed it up in North Carolina big time. Let me tell you, there were some things that I wasn't used to in that contract. And I would have been like pushing hard on things that would have been really unrealistic for that state. So keep in mind also that as a real estate professional, we are a professional in our realm, in our state, in our area. Okay? And we are going to have your back any day, all day. I'm here for you. So if you are ready to sell your house in South Carolina, Tennessee, or North Carolina, give me a call. Let's do it. And as you can see today, I'm in this really cute little Airbnb in downtown Clarksville. So if you are ever coming to the Clarksville area and want a little place to stay, a little studio apartment to stay at, let me know and I'll get you hooked up with this Airbnb because it's really adorable and super convenient to downtown. So I hope you guys have a fantastic day and I will talk to you soon. And remember, the numbers don't lie. Thanks, friends.